This is Flipping Tables Podcast, episode 16. I am David Lyons, one of your hosts.
I'm Michael Edwards, the other angry host.
And I think we couldn't really call ourselves a tech podcast if we didn't spend at least some time talking about how Apple is doomed since they had WWDC yesterday, right?
Correct.
So this is, I feel like, because obviously we couldn't have waited 24 entire hours to talk about this. So we've talked about this a little bit, and I feel like a little bit of the opposite is happening because recent WWDCs have been, just for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, that's the Apple Worldwide Developer Conference, right? So this is their Google
Focus
I/O.
on the word developer.
Yes, developer. In the past years, it's been treated as a consumer show, but it's really not. It's a week-long developer show. And they either stream or live blog the keynotes, so consumers were always kind of in on what was going on. And every year it was Apple is doomed because of whatever.
No unicorn pad.
Yeah, no, some device didn't get revealed, something didn't happen, and that was unacceptable, and the company was doomed. This year felt like the opposite. Everyone was like, the company is definitely saved because of these things, and I understand the love. I get it.
We're just softly touching the table. No, I mean, I have to say, as the representative of more of the Apple fanboy on the podcast, which I'll accept that label if it's said lovingly and not as like a religious fanatic idiot that
the gentle punch in the arm.
I gladly admit that I am an Apple enthusiast. I think for the Apple enthusiast, it's a whole lot to be excited about. A lot of Android features we've wanted a long time and pretended that didn't matter until now.
Until Apple invented them.
Yep. But no, I mean, like, compared to last year with iOS 7, it was like, look at how new it looks. And this year was all like, we're done with changing how it looks for a while. And look at all the awesome stuff we needed.
Yes. Well, because it's the right phrase, isn't it? Last year was look at how new it looks. This year is look at how new it works.
Yeah.
Look at all these new things it does. They actually, it's kind of a BS metric, but there were like 4,000 new APIs. And I think the biggest thing, because I mean, I like Apple, but I'm definitely not. I'm pro whoever works best. Like, that's why I carry an Android phone, but I use a MacBook Air laptop because those are the ones that suit my needs the best. But the fact that they opened up and said, we're going to allow extensibility, we're going to let third-party keyboards. That was the one.
I never saw, no one thought that would ever happen.
Yes, no one expects the Spanish third-party keyboard. So, that was like, because that's a sea change. That is, we are doing things differently than we have in the past. Well, I mean,
because something like the keyboard is, as basic as it is, that's exactly what Apple's like. We love controlling this. No, you will all ruin this. We're not going to let you. Even though we have to just talk about the shift key if you want to talk about ruining it. But.
Oh, yeah. Was that an iOS 7 change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it got worse because initially it was a little clearer, I think, even though it was still a little bit confusing. But they like, oh, you guys don't get the shift key? How about we make it even harder to understand?
Well, 'cause I always thought it was weird that and as far as I know, this goes all the way back, the keyboard is always all caps, right?
Yeah.
Or it looks all caps. You're not typing in all caps.
Aesthetically, makes their designers happier, I guess.
I just feel like there's a lot of lost communication happening.
I mean, look at your MacBook keyboard, all caps. I mean, not that matters because you're not going to be able to change that.
Yes, but I feel like the biggest difference there is that the keys on a tactile keyboard are designed to tell you this is what that key does, now stop looking at it.
Yeah.
Whereas, because most people should eventually learn to touch type, I hope. But with a glass top keyboard on a touch device, you kind of have to look at it. I mean, I don't think anyone would honestly claim they touch type even on an iPad, which has a way bigger,
Yeah,
feel.
I've tried to do that, and you get some pretty funny sentences that come out with the autocorrect.
Just like
Just Colbert calculator.
so, but okay, so the third party keyboard is that part of the extensibility?
And to me, like
thing?
that one, like no one at face value is like, wow, that's amazing technically.
No.
It's more like a symbol of like, wait, Apple is doing that now?
Yes. Well, because
Apple stopped beating his wife. Like,
when did you stop beating your wife? But that's so Tim Cook took over the company after Steve Jobs passed away, and even the biggest Apple fans were like, well, no, Tim Cook's cool, and there's still a lot of other designers and people who are still with the company who obviously had a huge say in the company, but now that Steve Jobs is gone, the company's going to collapse.
Yeah.
It was and then there was the weird rumor mill of that he had this like secret plan for, I heard 5 years. I've seen longer, but the one I heard most was for 5 years, the company has the plan.
I mean, I bet he's the kind of guy that thought about the next 5 years, but through experience probably recognized that things don't go to plan all the time.
Well, and
But yeah, I'm sure he's
how could
like-
you possibly? I mean, in this field of all fields,
Yeah.
how could you possibly say I know right now what product I'm going to launch 5 years from now?
Yeah. 5 years ago, we didn't have the current resurgence of the tablet market.
Yeah, I mean, and only a couple years before that, we didn't have
Smartphones.
smartphones in their current
Sorry,
incarnation.
BlackBerry.
Blackberries were just Palm Treos that had a 3G radio or a 2G radio, I guess. They weren't smart. They were phones that did email. But that's what I mean. Is like you couldn't in 2006 unless you were working on the iPhone, you could not possibly have said, "Oh, maybe we'll eventually make a 9-inch version of this and call it an iPad." Like no one knew that was coming. And then even after the iPhone was out for a couple years, when the rumors started to hit the iPad, people were like, that's dumb. Wouldn't you just use a laptop?
Well, I think the closest thing you could get to is that I think they wanted to make the iPad first, and it just wasn't possible yet, like with profitable margins, like to make a 10-inch tablet with 10 hours of battery that was fast enough and good enough. And I think I think it was easier to do the phone.
You think there was probably like a social barrier that needed to be crossed because everyone
That too, probably.
had a crappy Razr flip phone, right? So when they said, "Oh, here's an iPhone instead of your piece of crap Razr flip phone," people were like, "Oh, I would love to have a phone that was awesome."
Market acceptance.
Yeah, but with an
huge
iPad, it's like, here's a thing you don't know that you need, and you have to spend a small fortune on to realize how
I
good
mean, we
it is.
joke now that like who needs an iPad?
Yeah, I feel there's a place for tablets.
It's easier to defend now than it would have been in 2006. Like,
Oh, yeah.
here's an iPad. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't consider myself any kind of technology prophet, but I definitely would have been like, I already have a laptop. Why would I want
that
this?
classic like gadget enthusiast conflict of that's really cool. I don't need
Yeah, I
it.
do
That's
not
really
need that.
cool.
And I even feel now like because I have a Nexus 7, which is quite a bit more portable, but it serves very specific purposes. Like it's not my go-to device really for anything. It's there's my tablet. So instead of reading this article on my phone, since my tablet is within arm's reach.
It's like this friend you hang out with every once in a while that you're always happy to see, but it's not your wife.
I would like call them and make plans, but when we're at the same restaurant, then it's like, oh, pull your chair over.
Yeah.
We'll catch up.
A happy hour now and then.
Poor tablet market. So other than extensibility, what were some of the cool things they
So I
announced?
think one of the coolest, a lot of this has an asterisk of we'll see how it works out, admittedly, but they still, I think, manage to inspire a lot of confidence, even though there is that asterisk on everything. But I think the new programming language is really interesting.
Swift?
Yeah.
With its super flat bird logo.
So if you're unfamiliar, everything developed for Mac and iOS for the past forever has been Objective-C, which, if you're a new modern hip programmer, is kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Yep.
There's no managed memory. There's like this halfway automatic resource counter arc thing that like helps you manually manage your memory, but there's all sorts of reasons that are out of my depth of why Objective-C is painful to live on.
Well, and it's also just really ugly.
Yeah.
Because it looks like a low-level language. Because when you need to communicate every little thing to the compiler in excruciating detail, you can't have vague generalities.
Yeah, you have to be very explicit all the time with the types of your variables and the way you're sending them, and like sending nils and
yeah, exactly.
Like
so
it's not very like friendly, and so that also means you spend half your life chasing down trivial bugs that are easy to trip on in a language that doesn't try to prevent you from doing anything badly.
Right. Yeah, you can absolutely, in lower level languages like C++ and Objective-C, or even C if you really want to go old school, you can absolutely get in there and be like, at this spot, I want to overwrite all the memory and just totally crash the device. Like, I don't know why you would want to do that, but that's a thing you could do. Whereas with a higher level interpreted language like Python or Ruby, you can't really easily tell it, hey, break everything.
And those are the right languages to mention, even though this is still a compiled language. It's not an interpreted language.
Right.
They just have a playground that pretends to be interpreted for a while you test things out.
Yeah, it does like a live emulator.
But
kind
you
of thing.
you wouldn't test a full app in that playground. I don't think you would test an algorithm to see if it's behaving the way you expect.
Right.
But no, I think it's interesting. But even though it's not like an interpreted language in that sense, it is borrowing a lot of the visual readability emphasis, and you don't have to put semicolons, which is the hipster thing. But you can, if you need that security blanket, you can put semicolons.
Yeah, which is, so I don't think there's, especially when you consider developing for an operating system platform like a native application, I don't think there's really an argument that's too strongly in favor of compiled versus interpreted. Because you're going to have to package it even if you don't compile it. So there's really no benefit to doing interpreted when it's going to be packaged into an app anyway. But the readability of an interpreted style language like JavaScript or Ruby or Python or whatever is it's just really welcoming. And the main argument that I've been seeing from people on Twitter over the last day is I'll find the meme, but it's like Neo sitting up in the chair in the Nebuchadnezzar, and it's like it says like, I know iOS. And the argument is like it's now so similar to JavaScript that someone who previously was not developing native applications for iOS could quickly learn the syntax and jump. And so that's the argument, right? Is before you had people who were like, I don't want to learn Objective-C, but I'd love to develop an app, but I don't want to learn Objective-C. And it's like, oh no, come over here. Before we just had oatmeal raisin cookies, but now we have chocolate chip. Come hang out.
Your trust issues can go away.
So I think it's a developer conference, right?
Yeah, and I think that got one of the biggest roars of enthusiasm from the crowd. Was like, I think all the tweets I saw were joking. If you know of John Siracusa, one of the like prominent Apple podcast nerds, he writes the like 50-page review every year in Ars Technica of every new OS 10, and he's on various podcasts, but. This is like his like few things he's always never expecting but always wanted from Apple are a new programming language that isn't a pain in the ass and a new file system. He didn't get a new file system, but he has a long rant about HSF Plus and unreliable
Oh, that is what they use, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're weird.
So he has lots
journal-
of very technical critiques of like, you cannot live on this forever, Apple. You have to get somewhere better, but someday maybe. But,
Right.
But I think there are lots of jokes of like John Syracuse, this is your day. You got so much stuff.
You
wanted.
win.
So I think there was a tear in his eye.
They finally listened to me.
But no, I mean, I guess the general sense is the most important thing to me is that there seemed like a very positive direction for Apple, and like, yeah, they're bringing in a lot of features that the competitors have been doing, and credit to the proper people who really invented those features, which isn't always Android. Sometimes it's Palm OS or it's Windows Mobile. It's just those weren't
Windows
popular
Phone.
platforms.
Well, so people joked about the widgets, and they're like, "Oh, iOS will never have widgets," and they found a way to put widgets into iOS without actually giving you widgets. Which I don't know if that's like a backhanded compliment. Like, oh yeah, widgets are cool. We're just gonna make them kind of useless and cram them into the notification shade. It's like, are they really still widgets then? Aren't they just smart notifications?
It's definitely a different take. I think Apple's thinking it's more of a glanceable thing. Like you pull down the shade and look at your whatever your rich notification,
right?
Your permanent notification, and then you bid on eBay, I guess.
Yeah, because they're all notifications like you can interact with, sort of, and you can do things with, sort of. So it's like, I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo the feature. I just feel like widgets, they're not widgets.
Well, it's clear Apple considers the home screen like sacred ground. I mean, that is their app drawer, because there is no drawer.
Yeah, and don't they have, I mean, you use an iPhone every day. Don't they, aren't one or two of the icons like smart? Like, doesn't the calendar icon actually show the day?
The calendar icon gets to be smart and update like a live tile. I mean, it doesn't, not really like a live tile. It's not that dynamic, but it always shows the current date.
Right. So the inroads are there.
Yeah, maybe they're just like, our API for updating a square isn't mature yet, and we'll give it square updates to people later. But
we have not yet perfected the putting words
But
in
you
a
know
square.
what it means is until Apple finally, in quotes, gives home screen widgets, which I don't think it's a foregone conclusion they ever will, every stupid concept
Yes.
video maker.
Every senior student designer is uploading to Dribble his version of widgets. And I actually saw one just right before WWDC.
Was it the like pinched...
I don't know if you could resize them, but it was Windows Live tiles.
Yeah.
Like, because when you have a grid of icons, some of the icons take up a 2x2 instead of a 1x1, and it's got rich information. That's a Windows Live tile.
Yeah, and I think it was just the way you did it is you just pinched out a music app and you'd get a music player widget.
See, that's slightly less useful than it just being big all the time, but it's kind of neat.
Well, his idea was like you would peek into apps with that.
Oh, so you'd be like, "Oh, what's going on in here?"
And then
like, "Hey."
It sounds like it needlessly adds non-obvious complex. Like
yes, yeah. How would you communicate to someone like, "Oh, you can"? It's not a natural user interface, Mike. Is the problem? But it's so. I mean, but if I was a Microsoft designer for Windows Phone and I saw that, they were like, "Oh, wouldn't this be amazing if Apple invented these widgets?" And I'd be like, "No, that's literally our entire interface. Like, that's not. You can't have that." And I mean, I don't want anyone to own. Just like I always hate when, as much as I love Android, I do hate the gush of like, "We had that first.
yeah.
Welcome to the party, guys."
Well, especially because I mean. Yeah, because in reverse, it's not a good look, no matter who's saying that.
It's not.
But I mean, it's not always even true. It's like, oh, you mean like a card-based multitasking? Oh, Palm OS had that.
And did it really well.
And the UI idea has been around forever. The very first mobile Safari had a card interface for the tabs.
Really?
And like, granted, that's not multitasking, but it's the UI idea of
Exactly.
swiping between views.
Actually, I don't remember HyperCard that in depth, just because I was like 10 when it was kind of at the peak of its deal. But I've heard people falter back to that, and they're like, well, the card interface was really invented by HyperCard. It's like, no, that's not how that worked at all. If you actually remember what it looked like, it was full screen every time because they were old computers. That's how they worked. It's like, I know you want to give Apple credit for everything. If you're an Apple fanboy, you want to give Microsoft credit for everything if you're a Microsoft fanboy, but HyperCard, no.
And I know that the reason this is a thing is because marketing departments are always so hyperbolic with like the most advanced operating system ever and innovative and blah, blah, blah. But I actually am really sick of the word innovative, and I think it's a Inigo Montoya moment of just like, why does a good feature have to be brand new, number one? Why does it have to be something the world has never seen? And it's probably because marketing departments are always pretending it is, but people just want to pull them down a notch. But why is this obsession with originality? Like,
so I think I'm going to grasp wildly here, but I think I have an explanation for that. Plausible deniability.
okay.
Yes. And you're like, why? How is that related? Because, Michael, because if you didn't, so you're a tech company, let's just say Apple.
I'm just a tech company.
So if you're just a tech company that's worth like $200 billion and you announce a new feature and you don't claim that it's yours and that you invented it and that it's brand new and that no one else has ever done it, then are you not opening yourself up to copyright and patent lawsuits? Like, you have to go forward acting like I made this, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's
on every face of it.
I mean, I would believe it's just, even if you just said it's just a marketing, like no one's going to come out and say, our product's all right. I mean, it's got a bunch of stuff everyone else is doing.
Certainly. That's cool. I mean, I'd maybe weigh your options.
I mean, it's our first try at this feature, so it's probably not even that great yet. And
yeah.
Maybe wait till next year.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt the marketing arm. Like, Apple's never going to come out and be like, the new iPhone, you should wait till next year.
Is it really any protection to say you invented something? If
would it not?
Isn't that just incite people to go, hell no, you didn't?
But I mean, there is definitely the prior art arm of patent reform or patent litigation.
Invalidation.
Yeah, so if you come to the table and say like, no, we invented this, and then other people are like, no, clearly you didn't.
Yeah.
Then you'd be like, oh, well, I didn't know about that. I had never seen that.
I guess that's like if you a lot of companies have a disclaimer. If you send them ideas, they're like, we are not going to give you credit for anything. If you send us something, it's ours.
Yep.
And you can't send us your idea and then sue us later about it.
Did you, when you were a kid and you read Nintendo Power, did you send any Mega Man boss designs to Nintendo Power?
No.
Do you remember that?
No.
I must have sent like a half a dozen different. I loved it. But it was the same thing. It was like, if you send this to us, we'll give you like a thumbs up if we use your character, but like that's it.
Yeah.
Then we own it. And then they got an army of, 5 to 15-year-olds scribbling on graph paper, sending them designs, which is fine, audience participation and all. But I feel like even though there's obviously the marketing side, like there's no debating that, I think plausible deniability for patent litigation has to be part of it. And there's definitely the extension of the marketing where Apple's entire image is, we got here first.
Think different.
Yes, we do things differently and betterly and more gooderly. Which I have to say, the fact that they say that and then in the same breath say, we don't have to be number one, we never have to be first to market, we just have to be best. And it's like, how can those things are mutually exclusive? How can you possibly be both of those things? And people gobble that crap up.
What, being first and best?
Being first and improving on the ideas of others. You can't invent a great idea and have copied and improved that same idea. It's one or the other.
They want to be the first post in the forum troll.
Pretty much.
First.
First. When you're actually third.
Honestly, I don't see they really don't claim to be first as much as maybe they used to. I don't know. Someone should analyze that. Spend valuable time of their life analyzing that. But it does seem like it is mostly the rhetoric of, yeah. We waited 2 years to do copy and paste, but
we nailed it.
Yeah.
We totally nailed it. So you use iOS every day. Mm-hmm. I don't know how often you use your iPad, but
not very often.
Not very often. Is it your magazine reader?
Yeah, it is a graphic novel machine.
Yeah. So, but you do use your iPhone every day. So going from iOS 7 to iOS 8, what little paper cuts have they put Band-Aids on?
Oh man, where to start? A lot of it's potential. So again, the asterisk of we'll see how well it goes. But
always
the idea that my password manager could be directly integrated into any app that could possibly need it, or just integrate it into my keyboard, sounds awesome.
Would that work with the Touch ID?
That would be even better. There's been some speculation I've read about that. So again, go listen to our password episode, but I'm a good citizen. I have crazy 20-digit hashed passwords for everything now. And right now, my workflow, if I go to a site that I haven't logged into in a while and I need to log in, I have to go to the 1Password app, put in my master password, copy, switch back to the app where I want to sign in and paste. And compared to what I do in Chrome on the desktop where I just hit Command /
and boom, and it's done.
And autofill. I want that for mobile. And so there's sort of the details matter of whether it's actually possible with what Apple's put in place, but it sounds like 1Password will either be able to just offer itself as an extension in any app, sort of like the Intents, totally exactly like Intents, or maybe they'll roll their own custom keyboard. Maybe it'll be identical to Apple's keyboard in every way except a password button.
Which is how LastPass, they don't require you to use their keyboard, thank God, because it's terrible, but they have a LastPass keyboard where you can just be like, ba-boom, and I like the copy-paste version just because a lot of apps and websites don't properly flag
and it's
the
like
fields.
Putting the address field. And
so I prefer to do a partially manual process, but I can totally see now on iOS, every password manager is going to be like keyboard.
So that's a pretty big paper cut is when I switched to hard passwords, it really pushed me into, and to be fair, on iOS, a lot of your life is in apps anyway. Almost everything is go to the app version.
Right.
So a lot of those are sign in once and you're done. So all my Google stuff, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, I signed in once and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So it wasn't like the end of my world that I had to copy and paste out of a separate app. But I'm hoping that becomes not a problem.
So what did you get... the way the notifications are going to change. So what did you gain there? Because I know what they showed, and I was like, I thought you could already do that.
Yeah. So the biggest changes right now in iOS 7, if you get a notification, there's 3 kinds. There's 3 things you can control. You can control what type of notification it is, whether you want nothing, whether you want a banner to just pop down from the top, or whether you want it to, the old style, interrupt what you're doing and pop an alert in front of you.
Oh my God, they did used to work that way.
Yeah.
Oh, those were horrible.
You can actually tell every single app, and this is one of the things one of the few things I like about Apple's notification settings is you can tell every app exactly what they're allowed to do when they notify you.
So you could have different styles for different apps?
Yeah, you can say Gmail's allowed to completely interrupt me whenever and pop in my face, but Spotify, you never get to do anything. Sorry. Shut up.
I don't want to hear from you.
Or, I want a noise from Outlook, but no badge. Or I want a badge from this app, but nothing else. So you get to just decide for yourself what every app does.
Right.
What you're gaining here is you can now act on the notifications. So right now the notifications are just shortcuts that take you to the app.
Okay, so now when David Lyons tagged you in a picture on Facebook.
Yeah,
you can like that.
You get a summary. Yeah, now you can like or reply straight without leaving your current app.
Right. Or like, so with, say you got a mail notification and you hit reply, it'll like pop open directly to the Compose.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, welcome to the party.
Yeah,
Mike.
welcome to 3 years ago, but a very welcome addition of what others have already been doing.
No, but that sounds like, that's
a paper cut.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, I could just go to the app, but it's like, if I could save 2 taps 100 times a day.
What always happens to me is I'm reading an article and having a light conversation with someone. And that's just like constantly leaving my article.
Right.
And that gets old really fast. So now it can be like, nah, I'm good. Or, yep.
Yeah, I think Kevin Purdy calls those, I think 10-4 notifications, where it's like I don't need to contribute anything to it. It's just like, yeah, okay, So it's like if you get an SMS that says like "Have a great day," it's like I don't need to do anything with that. I just need it to be like, oh, okay, go away now. Thanks, but go away now.
Some grunt response.
Yeah. So that as a way off, like that's why I'm looking forward to Android Wear, because a lot of notifications I get, I would love to just look down at my wrist and be like, and then go back to my life instead of being like my phone vibrated and I don't know what that means, so I gotta take my phone out.
I even think just like basic email triage, like of just like archive.
Yeah.
Good to know archive.
Yeah, copy that. Yeah, exactly. And actually, so with the vibrate thing or ringtone, some people are like, well, you just have a custom ringtone for everything.
Custom vibration pattern for everything.
Yeah, that to me, I don't know anyone who actually does that.
Just Morse code of every.
Yeah, I guess maybe I would consider setting up a custom ringtone and vibration pattern for like Susan. So it's like if my wife needs to get in touch with me in an emergency, my phone, if she texts me like 911, then maybe that would make my phone flip out. Like it rings and it vibrates nonstop.
And there's some of that in iOS already of like you can set up certain people as VIPs. And so like you can say, even though I've muted my phone, if that person calls, make it ring.
Yeah, and that I can see a little bit of value to that, but that's like, my spouse, if my kid was old enough, like maybe my kid, or if I was on call for my job, God forbid. But, like if the servers rely on me, then maybe, I would set something like that up. But people are like, oh, well, you can just customize every notification. It's like, I don't want to do that. I want them to just be useful on their own.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people who just swing the other way and they're like, no notifications. I don't want to be notified of anything. I'll check my email when I check it. I'll check Twitter when I check it. And I've actually started to lean more that way.
Yeah, I turn off, basically, an app has to be really, really special, a really special snowflake for me to leave notifications on. I'm pretty much, they're all off unless I deem otherwise.
Yeah. And that actually, I've noticed that when socialness gets shoehorned into something, that they use that as an excuse for notifications, because like, hey man, this is a communication platform, we got to be able to get in touch with you. Notifications are how we do that.
I don't think developers need any excuse, because the most single playeriest of single player games is like, how about I notify you of things?
Well,
it's like, no.
I feel most
Rate my
annoyed.
app.
No,
0.
Yeah, 0 stars, F-. I've noticed a lot with apps that have social features that I care absolutely nothing about. The one that springs to mind is Spotify.
Yeah.
I follow no one on Spotify. As far as I know, no one follows me. But every once in a while, because I follow a couple of social playlists, it has in the background attached me to those people. So it'll be like, so-and-so just liked this song. Or, hey, this new album's available. And I'm like, I don't care. Shut up.
So are we just going to spin off into app sins right now? Because when you're talking about notification sins, I have to bring up what Twitter's been doing lately.
Oh, God. Yeah, okay. WWDC was interesting. Go look at it on The Verge. We have to talk about this now.
So Twitter has this thing, and it seems like everyone's sort of universally like, yeah, you too, buddy. Like, oh man, you'll get a notification, and it's just like this guy and this random other guy. You happen to follow them, but are talking about this third thing that you don't give any shits about.
Yes, Twitter notifications have gone full 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I don't actually follow that many people on Twitter. You have actually a super curated list, don't you?
I think this one's a joke, but I'll include the picture of this. I retweeted this. It says, it's a Twitter notification. It says, Ann Coulter and Deepak Chopra are talking about Fugazi lyrics. And I'm pretty sure it's fake, but it's exactly the kind of cool theory that Twitter is up to.
Well, so do you happen to know how many people you follow on Twitter?
I'm on my page. I follow 230, which seems like a lot.
That's actually way more than I thought. But it's still not that many in the Twitter scheme of things. So I only follow a couple of like highbrow tech people, like pseudo tech celebrities. But if 2 or 3 of them are talking about like some open source project or some change in a piece of software or something at WWDC, it'll pop up and it'll be like, these 5 people just favorited, so-and-so's tweet. And I'm like, I don't care. If I cared about so-and-so's tweet, I would be following them on Twitter. And I get it. They're trying to increase like discoverability and blah, blah, blah. But I just, and Twitter has done even a second more evil thing where this does not happen enough that I have yet looked for a way to turn it off. So it's like every time it happens, I'm like, stop it. But it only happens like once or twice a week. So I haven't really fallen all over myself to see if this is even something I can disable.
Yeah, and I think sort of the narrative that is probably sort of just speculation, but makes sense to me, is the MBAs have taken over Twitter, and they're like,
yeah,
we got to monetize everything, monetize all the things. And I believe it, but the way they've dealt with their APIs. Oh, I just put in an Imager rehost of that. Right above that. But in our show notes, we'll have an example of this notification spam. But it does seem, do you remember the dick bar from like a year or two ago?
I do not.
So basically everyone...
Oh, yes. Sorry. That, like, out of context, like, my head was in another place, and I was just like, where is this?
Do you remember the dick bar? That great dick bar we went to? No. For those who don't remember, Twitter knows that everyone loves their poll to refresh.
Yes.
And what they apparently didn't realize is how sacred ground that is. When I pull to refresh, I don't want to see crap.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to see my new stuff. And so they added in when you... is that the title?
I think, do you remember the dick bar?
Okay.
The show title.
Good. So when you would pull to refresh in Twitter's app, it would show you promoted tweets or promoted content.
Yes. Which I think was live for about 42 seconds.
Because immediately the trending hashtag was dick bar.
Yes.
And it was just like, this is a PR disaster.
Yeah. I'm really hesitant to search for that hashtag on Twitter, but I think I have to try. I have to go into that.
There's a Marco Arment article of why the dick bar is offensive.
Oh yeah, throw that in, because who knows what I'll actually come up with on Twitter. Nothing good.
They called it the quick bar. That's why the dick bar became the...
I feel so bad for branding and marketing people who have to, the engineers come to them and say, oh, hey, we're going to do this new thing. And the marketing people are thinking like, we know people are going to hate this. And now we have to name it in a way that doesn't open it up to harassment.
I think it's got to be the opposite, though. I don't think the engineering people are sitting around like, how can we ruin this thing I love? It's the marketing people are like, we got to sell ads. We're in charge now. Go tell the engineers you have to make this. We had this great idea for a quick bar.
Yeah.
And the engineers are probably
right.
like,
Don't make us code the dick bar.
Yeah.
So maybe the first person to call that was an engineer from Twitter with an anonymous account who was like,
My only way of trying to get this killed.
yeah, I can make this terrible for everyone. So this is the spammy thing that Twitter's doing is there's the so-and-so are talking about this, and they also do so-and-so is following
Yeah.
so-and-so, which I feel like that's very Facebooky. Because that's Twitter's people you may know. Mm-hmm. And it's like on...
In a place you didn't ask for it. A place
Yes.
that's supposed to be, here's something that's important and happened to you.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think the thing that's so offensive about all this is it's sort of against the whole idea of Twitter is you selected the things you wanted to see. And anytime Twitter is like, well, what if we shoved something you didn't ask for down your throat?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's kind of against the entire soul of what your product is supposed to be.
Yes. And I mean, it had to go this way because they were like, what if we launch this product that's really simple and works really well and we have absolutely no way to make money off of it?
Yeah.
How about that?
And for those who think, like, why can't we have nice things? Well, I just have to point at app.net and say, like, no one wants to pay for this.
Nope.
Everyone wants it for free.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I mean, every time somebody complains about ads on Facebook, you remember a couple years ago, it was like every other month, there was this rumor that Facebook was going to start charging. There was going to be like premium Facebook.
is this just like the old AOL
Yeah.
forward spam?
Yeah, I mean, the exact same kind of...
Instant Messenger is going to cost money soon.
Exactly. But the thing is, at least Instant Messenger is like SMS. The overhead to power that is so trivial that it's like they don't even care. They don't even notice that they're wasting CPU cycles on this. But Facebook is like a really heavy application, and because they keep pushing photos more and more, it's getting heavier. So it's believable that there would be like, you know what, we'll turn off all your ads for $50 a year. $50 a year, no ads, or $5 a month, or $100 a year, or whatever. Like it's a business strategy that would fail miserably, but there's at least logic to it. But with Twitter, it's like, I don't know how they're ever going to make this work. Like, eventually, doesn't the VC have to run out and they have to just be like, we're done, it's done?
It has to get pretty ugly, just pretty fast, of just like 50% of your stream is now ads.
Well, because I feel like if you ever actually look at the numbers, Twitter does not have nearly as many users as people think. A lot of those users are dead. A lot of those users are brands and fake accounts that are bots. So, like news networks and brands and stuff, TV shows, those kinds of things, they act like Twitter is this mega popular communication channel, and it's kind of not. It's cool. I like Twitter. I would be sad if it went away. But if they came to me and said, how much are you willing to pay for Twitter? They would probably not be happy with the amount of money I would put on it.
Yeah.
I would do like $1 a month.
In units of beats. How many? How many 3 billions?
How many Beats audios? None Beats audios. I would do $1, like Pandora style, like $1 a month, turn off ads.
Yeah.
Here, I would pay
probably,
$12 a year. But
there's plenty of services that they're not, I wouldn't say Twitter's important to anything for me, like mission critical.
No.
But I like it enough that I probably would consider paying $10 a year to just be ad free.
Sure. And I mean, so let's just pretend for a second that half of their customers were willing to do that. So they have like 50 million registered users, something like that. So 25, that'd be $250 million. That's probably not enough by a long shot.
Yeah.
Especially because they keep...
But you know what that would mean is the non-paying, every incentive would be to start spamming the hell out of the ones that weren't. And
So it would just turn into ad nightmare universe.
Yeah, it'd be like
for the people
$10,
that don't pay.
$10, and that might just kill their user base even faster. But
yeah, I mean, I do not envy the people who have to solve this problem. This is a hard problem. We gave something to someone for free that they can live without. How do we now get them to pay for it? Like, if heroin wasn't addictive, drug dealers would probably not give you the first taste for free, right? So, like, I would be bummed if Twitter went away, but I wouldn't be heartbroken.
yeah, the whole microblogging thing is kind of, is it like instant messenger now? It's just like it's going to be this thing you can do in 800 different ways that doesn't need to be one monolithic thing, or...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every social network has their culture. Like, the kind of thing I post to Twitter and the kind of thing I post to Google Plus frequently overlap, but not always.
Well, it's interesting you bring up culture, because I think the one community that I think is especially suited to Twitter, I mean, there may be others too, but comedians, because brevity is the soul of wit, and so tweets lend themselves to short jokes in a way
true.
you would not do that as much or as successfully on Facebook or Google Plus.
It's true.
Like, I don't see a lot of short one-liners unless it's an image or multimedia on Google Plus.
True. So, wild proclamation. If and when Twitter dies, it goes to the comedians the way MySpace went to musicians. So it never truly dies. It just becomes like, I want to know what this comedian is up to, so I go to Twitter.
Yeah.
And I mean, actually, several of the accounts I follow on Twitter are just like, they're basically glorified notifications. Like, I follow
the RSS feed.
Yeah, I follow the Colorado Department of Transportation. So it's like during the winter when I was going snowboarding a lot, there would be like avalanche warnings, or there would be an accident, something would get shut down, like the tunnel shut down like every freaking day during the winter. So I would see on Twitter like, oh, the tunnel shut down, and it's like, it was full. But there are 1,000 other ways I could get that information.
The other probably best case for what Twitter's useful for is sort of impromptu access to support services from companies by shaming them.
Oh my God. That
so when that
is so useful.
So yesterday an RTD bus completely just roared by with no intention of like actually serving the customers waiting.
Can I link to that conversation? It was a public conversation.
Yeah. And so I tweeted at RTD the ride or whatever their Twitter account is and said, so a 15 bus just blew past me and didn't stop. And they actually, I don't know if anything will come of it internally to the organization, but to their credit, they replied and said, very sorry to hear that. What route were you on? We'd like to follow up on this. And that's a very good PR move when someone complains very publicly about your bad service.
Yeah, because even if absolutely nothing comes of it, then they at least made you feel better, which is kind of what PR is all about. It's like they can't go back in time and they can't send you a private bus. Like there's a limit to what they can do. I'm sure they're not going to like fire anybody.
No. But I could imagine if, and probably one tweet isn't going to do a damn thing, but if like every single day or on this particular guy's route, there's like tweets every single day of like, what the hell, man?
Right.
Like,
yeah, because they know the time of day it happened
yeah.
and the place.
Eventually there would just be a very smelly pattern of like, yeah, this guy's toxic to our ratings.
Right. I've used it with Comcast a couple times. I can't.
Comcast.
Yeah, it's always terrible. But I have done and I've tried to be aware. Like, I don't want to just go on Twitter and be like, you know, F these effing. I mean, although it's tempting because you know that will elicit a response. It's like that's really no different than going into a restaurant and just being like screaming at the waitress because your food came out cold or because, you know, it's like the waitress didn't cook it. Don't blame them. You know, don't scream at the steward on the plate, the flight attendant.
And no matter how righteous your anger is, when you come out that way, sometimes it's easy for the support person to be like, well, this person's crazy, so I don't feel bad not really helping them because they're clearly crazy.
Yes, exactly. And it's even just the moral side of it is, even if you still got your problem resolved, you shouldn't maybe treat people like garbage for no reason. Like, you're frustrated.
There is that, not treating people like garbage for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, you're frustrated. I've been frustrated. We kind of have a podcast around the theme of being frustrated. But it's still like, I don't think it's beneficial to... If you're going to tear into someone, you should at least tear directly into the person who wronged you, not to the person who's trying to make up for the person who wronged you.
Yeah.
It's like... Yeah, so I have done it. I have gone on Twitter, and I feel like I'm going into the middle of a room and just being like, man, Comcast is awful.
And waiting for Comcast to show up. It's like the Beetlejuice.
That's exactly what it is, but it works because then they're like, oh, someone summoned me. And they come over and they're like, hey, buddy, what's going on? And then it's like, oh, now I have your ear.
Yeah.
It's like I would have had to wait on phone for half an hour.
I am immediately ready to retweet your resolution and praise you in front of the world if you solve my problem.
Yes. And that's the other side of that coin. Is like, I'm going to call you out in public, but if you do something awesome, I will also praise you in public.
Which isn't everyone. Most people are like, I got mine, I'm out of here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So if you're going to do public shaming, you have to do public praising. I think that's only fair. At least it's fair.
Yes.
So I keep getting distracted by this the shaming.
Any other app sins while we're on that topic? Or notification sins?
Probably. Well, I know I mentioned Spotify. I feel like anything that notifies me in a naggy way, and I say naggy because, like, with Twitter, they're not annoying me to the point where I've looked how to turn it off. I'm going to now because now I'm like hot about it. But if we hadn't discussed this, I would have just been like, Like, I realized I still was getting this spam newsletter that I don't remember ever signing up for, but it comes like so intermittently that I'm just like, delete. And then finally, just like a week ago, I was like, why have I not unsubscribed from this? I've never ever read this. I don't know where it's coming from, but it was just like, oh, hey man, do you want to read? Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'll bother you in a month. But it was like, if I got it every day, then I would have been like, this is bullshit. And I would have turned it off right away or unsubscribed right away. But because it came, it's like, and I know they know.
Yeah.
Like, research goes into time of day you tweet, time of day you send newsletters, frequency you repost stuff. It's different for different networks because different networks have different high volume times. And I'm sure that same kind of research has gone into notifications. How could it not? It's another spam channel.
Man, I'm just looking at the email notifications and web notifications page, and it's sort of like oh yeah, we're still not sending you those old newsletters, but here's this new one we opted you into. And I feel like the notifications are taking that path of like, oh, we totally respected all your old settings. We just added a new checkbox.
Yes.
And it's checked by default because middle finger in your face.
Because F you. And so do you think that's, are notifications going to, or have they already supplanted email?
I turn off email notifications at every opportunity I get. I don't want email that's just someone touched your shoe on this social network. I had to struggle not to say something that sounded really nasty.
You couldn't have just gone with like any of the known established, like,
nope.
No? Okay. But I feel like that's, the web is, internet access is growing way more over mobile than it is on desktop. Like, we know this.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine a lot of nations that never had a strong personal computer ownership are just going to leapfrog that and go straight to mobile device. I mean, many of them sort of have.
Right.
Like, these people are never going to buy an iMac or a Dell for their home, they're just buying smartphones, and then maybe they'll grow up to something.
Right. So that sounds like marketers and SEO gurus and all that other nonsense, they're going to not see email as the way to reach those people, whether it is or not. But it seems like they're going to be like, oh, well, if we can get them to install this app, then we can bombard the crap out of them with custom notifications.
See, that's like the formula is, if we can get them to X, then we can bombard them. And I'm just like, that whole bombard thing?
Yeah.
That's,
oh, maybe don't do that.
like, you make me swear off your brand when you do that. Like, I will get so annoyed that I associate you as being bad people.
Yeah. No, it's
So that's the...
yeah, bad people's probably the right term. Like, it's just like, I know you're not trying to kill me or steal my things, but I feel like you are actively trying to harm and degrade my quality of life.
Well, like, you so clearly care so little about my experience using your service that you're willing to constantly, like, take this megaphone and, like, I'm trying to focus on enjoying whatever it is, and you're just like, hey, buddy, how you doing? Did you know this?
Now I just want to go turn all my notifications off and just be like, you know what, I'll get to my email when I get to it.
I do have a blog post about that I will put in the show notes.
Look at that. See, now that is some SEO guru shit right there. You're like, oh, I just happen to have this channel to advertise my
By the way,
so I noticed you're a big music guy. You're a musician.
just a music person.
Just a music. You're a composer of musics as well as a consumer of musics, and you use iDevices. So that means that for at least part of history, you have had to suffer the nightmare of iTunes, and for a while, that was it. If you used an iDevice, you had to use iTunes. With the iPod, for a long time, you had to use iTunes. Now you can like kind of get around it. It's kind of a pain.
Yeah.
And then with the original iPhone, you needed it to sync apps and stuff until they did wireless syncing.
Yeah. It didn't used to be a nightmare. Back when the whole idea of the computer being your digital hub actually made sense. Like when it was like, yeah, these portable devices don't have Wi-Fi. They
True.
don't have data plans. Their storage takes some management, and it's easier to do that with a keyboard and mouse. Like there was a time where it's like iTunes wasn't the evil bastard, bloated, fat bastard of software where it was like, yeah, I set up all my playlists with a computer that like makes it easy to search and do this.
Right.
And, I have a smart playlist that's like, grab only sad songs from 2009 that start with the letter S, and you could do that kind of smart playlist and then just say, sync that shit.
Right.
But that era quickly gave way to, I'm out on the go, and I'm like, I want to hear this song now.
Right. Yeah, it's like, what do you mean I have to
and as soon as
have prepared this ahead of time?
And as soon as that wasn't we're living in the future, and it was like a reasonable, like, yeah, we all have these Wi-Fi-like speeds everywhere.
Yes.
Then why not just store it in the cloud and say, yeah, I'll play that one.
So I have to make this incredibly nerdy reference. So in D&D, yes, this is happening. In D&D, spellcasters have to prepare their spells ahead of time, which means you have to have an idea of what you're getting into so you can prepare the right spells so that you have them available. And then in later versions of D&D, they introduced the sorcerer, which has a smaller repertoire of spells but has them available all the time.
Yeah.
And that is exactly how I feel about streaming music. The moment I was like, I don't have to carry around music with me. I don't have to decide what to carry around with me, even though we have more storage than we could ever possibly need.
And you still get that choice of having synced stuff offline.
Yes. Yeah. These are my favorites or my pinned music or whatever. But yeah, the moment I was like, and like Netflix is the same way. I look at the DVDs on my shelf and I'm like, ugh, I have to dust those. But then when I look at Netflix, I'm like, everything I care about and millions of things more I didn't even know existed.
And you have that friend that puts DVDs back in the different case when they switch movies, and you end up with this like musical chairs of discs, and you're like, why did you do that? It's like you went into my computer and started renaming, like you switched to Mail and you renamed it Chrome because you were done using Chrome and renamed all my apps.
I feel like I've noticed it less with movies in my day-to-day life, and it's games. Because as children, we had cartridge games that you didn't care if they were just sitting out because
and
it was
just
cartridge.
a generic Nintendo sleeve they went into.
Yes, but as soon as we got to disc-based games, when somebody would take, Metal Gear Solid out to play Final Fantasy, and they would just leave Metal Gear Solid just laying there, it's like, it's going to get scratched. It's not a coaster. Will you please put it back in the freaking sleeve? Like,
And then they put it in the disc 2 part of Final Fantasy 7.
God, unacceptable.
And or maybe disc 3, whatever one was upside down would always lose its stickiness, and so the disc would always drop.
Yeah, yep.
Everyone who played in the disc era knows that feeling of like you open the second section of Final Fantasy VIII,
just thunk,
and just the disc has fallen.
Yeah, you just got the old PS1 black disc staring up at you.
And you're always worried it's gonna like slip down into the crack as you're opening the hinge, and that's gonna scratch it there.
Yeah, and then some of my friends may remember when they came to my house and we would play video games. They got like freaking concierge video game service because I'd be like, no. I'll switch it. You just stay right there, enjoy your cold beverage. I will go to the PlayStation and switch the disc. I'll get you a controller.
Do you need a massage? How are you feeling right now?
Don't touch my games. I didn't have a whole lot of games. I couldn't run the risk of them just throwing them about all willy-nilly. I just had like this horrible like Vietnam flashback to watching people and the kind of person who does that, they never just set a game down. They take it and they're like on the counter or on your media center or whatever, and it's like,
there's like crumbs and sand and whatever.
It's like, I wonder, from people who lived through the record era, did they have friends who just took records out and were just like, I'm done with that record.
Play Frisbee.
Yeah, now I'm gonna need a different record. I just those kids or adults, I guess, and for me it was my friends did not go home and do that to their games. And I tried very hard when I was at someone else's house not to just treat all their stuff like garbage because that seems rude.
Yep.
So anyway,
it's the early version of some people we know at work that when they stand up from chairs, the chair no longer exists.
And they just leave it wherever it drops. Yes, some people. You know who you are. So, but I feel like that
don't.
They really don't. We could name them by name, and it still wouldn't matter, but we won't. But I feel like that's, to me personally, because I don't have very specific songs or artists or movies or things that I have to have available to me all the time. And so this is, I think I've actually mentioned this before, this is the great impasse I'm at with Susan, is she really enjoys special features, and for some godforsaken reason, the streaming companies will not make that stuff available.
I'm sure Netflix would love to make that stuff available.
Yeah, I don't know where the choke is happening in the pipeline.
It's the owners. They're like, you want to pay us 6 times as much? Sure.
Well, and that's the thing, is I can buy a physical disc copy of a movie for, let's say when it comes out, it's like $15 or $20, and it comes with all this bonus stuff, but it also comes with more expensive packaging. They have to provide me a second disc to put the special features on. There's all this extra cost, whereas digitally, they could just literally jack up the price and not increase their expense at all.
Yeah.
Like, if Netflix raised their prices to $12 a month, but they were like, every movie that had special features, we now have the special features, Susan would throw money at them so fast because she loves that stuff. And I mean, a lot of movies' special features are terrible, but some of them are really great.
So my hunch is that the physical format is still so important to movie companies.
which is
if
so
for
obnoxious.
nothing else as some perceived hedge against the streaming companies.
Yeah.
That they want every differentiator they can possibly think of for like
Yeah.
buy the physical version.
No, you're definitely right.
And I mean, maybe they're still stuck in the mindset of like, Blu-ray's just the latest one. There's going to be like 12 more physical formats. And so that's why they love you buying a Blu-ray, because they know you'll buy a
Whatever comes
unicorn ray in 5 years.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. And I actually, I will link to this on Amazon just because it blew me away. But I'm big, I think it's come up before. I'm a big Disney fan. So when Frozen came out, I was like, yes, we can buy Frozen. And we had to get the Blu-ray because we wanted the special features. And on Amazon, I don't know about other services, but on Amazon, you can actually buy the digital version with special features. And it specifically announces it. It's like movie plus special features. And I was like, I have never even seen that option before, which is like, it's the whisper. It's like, this is the spark of revolution, right? Like this is, you're in, 16th century France, and you're in the tavern and you're thinking about how terrible the monarchy is. And then over, the din of rabble, you hear someone else saying all the things you also hate about the monarchy. And you're like, oh, and you lock eyes with that person and they realize they heard you. And like, that's the spark of revolution. So it's like, I just made this into something way more.
Yeah. So you just mentioned Disney and Frozen, and I have to call out the Onion article faking the executive like, we can do a real misogynist one now. Like we've done like 3 or 4 progressive, strong female characters. Now we can do a real Cinderella next.
Yep. Yeah, which was a funny Onion article, but it does. The conspiracy theorist fan in me does wonder, like, do they sometimes build up goodwill so that they can then go back to classics? Because classics sell. I mean, regardless of your moral feelings about them, they always sell well.
So here's the actual headline is Disney CEO figures they've built up enough goodwill to do a real sexist one.
Yeah. I mean, for anybody who hasn't seen Frozen, I'm going to just go ahead and completely spoil it for you. So, seriously, if you don't want to hear this, you might as well just...
She doesn't just sit around waiting for a man to rescue her.
She doesn't just sit around waiting for a man to rescue her. The true love is between siblings, not between a man and a woman, and the prince is the villain. Like, when I was done watching that movie, I was like, this is the most progressive Disney movie ever made. Like... The only thing they didn't have a lot of was minorities, and to be fair, the part of the world it's supposed to be in, like, you wouldn't have pretty much anything except white blonde people, because they're in the far...
Sweden?
Yeah, they're... it's Arendelle is the name of the kingdom, but I mean, that's basically where they are. They're in, like, the Norway, Sweden area. Like, you just don't see a lot of Hispanic and African and Asian people in that part of the world, especially at this time in history when travel was difficult.
Yeah.
So it's like, shoehorning minorities in would have been weird.
Would have probably been more offensive.
Right, like they just happen to be around. But I mean, the fact that you have all these non-traditional values being expressed in a Disney movie, that was also one of the most successful Disney movies ever.
And that was probably part of the argument before, is like, well, people want the damsel in distress and they want the hero and they like this archetype. And it's like, yeah, people do like that archetype. It's sold well for hundreds and thousands of years. But it turns out you can tell other stories too, and people will like them.
Yes, which is, to me, like, that's like the ultimate best way that could go. So it's like, we tried something different. We made a cartoonish amount of money off of our cartoon. Like, they had to go to the bank with big sacks with dollar signs on it. Right? But I mean, like, that's awesome, because then it incentivizes them to try new things and to maybe have, like, homosexual characters or transgender characters, like things they never would have touched before.
And I think it's fair to say this is actually the way that industry thinks. Like, they really, the people that produce films really do say things like, well, you can't have a female lead if there's no man.
Yes.
They, like, very simple, there's no context needed, like, oh, there's just a female lead? Nope.
Yeah.
Or, like, where's the love interest? You just like
That was what held Ender's Game up as a movie for like 2 decades, which I wish had continued to hold it up for another 200 years. So
But
no one would
at
have to see
least
it.
Orson had that sense of like, no, don't like give him some,
Yeah, don't make them into
which
a
they
teenage
sort
love
of
story.
started to sort of do, but at least they.
So although I could spend another hour ripping on Ender's Game, I do have to just say I felt like the studio executives wanted it to seem like a love story between Ender and Petra. Yeah, Ender and Petra. But I feel like the actual undertone was a bond of friendship, like a love friendship, like the way Greeks would have used the word love or Shakespeare would have used the word love.
Yeah.
But the studio execs were definitely like, we kind of got our way.
So if you need an example of when the studio execs did get their way, Prince Caspian. Just having Susan make out with Prince Caspian was just like sort of a big middle finger to.
Yeah. Yeah, we know this is supposed to be a children's story, but whatever. It's actually just a crappy rom-com.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We need to get the Twilight crowd with this.
God. I think I wouldn't last a day in LA. I would be hearing those kinds of conversations outside of Starbucks, and I would be hanging myself by that night.
I'm not even doing it justice for how annoying it gets in pitch meetings. They're like,
Yeah, we could tell an original story, but nah.
It's so obvious to me. We could spend a whole episode on this. When that's what bothers me about certain TV series. Like, I could talk a long time about why I love the modern BBC that tells very concise stories that are over. Like, there's 9 hours of story,
ending.
but yeah, that's one thing. But the whole like ensemble cast that hits every market demographic. You've got a 30-something. Recently divorced woman that's finding herself again. You've got the grandparents. You've got the teenager that's starting to do drugs. You've got, and it's sort of like just like
all
every single demographic they could possibly advertise to.
That they know spends a certain amount of money on a certain kind of product.
Yeah.
Because it's like, obviously, gay men and women have to like buy goods and services in our society. But for whatever reason, they just have decided that they're not a marketable audience.
Yeah. And I have nothing against ensemble casts or diverse casts or anything like that, but it just comes off so cloyingly like, yeah, we're just trying to make this a buffet of a buffet show.
Yeah, it's we want the family to sit down together. Oh, and by the way, that family is of a certain age and a certain race and a certain religion, has a certain number of kids and a certain number of a certain kind of pets, and drinks a certain soft drink while they watch a certain sport. Like, it's just, where is this family?
It's this weird all things to all people.
Yeah, but not minorities or atheists.
But I'd be fine with a crazy diversity in a show. I mean, I can think of examples of shows that had big ensembles, Arrested Development, Firefly, whatever.
Yeah.
Both canceled shows, but...
Because they were good. I would be okay with the crazy diversity if it
when
doesn't
comes
feel
off,
like...
Yeah, it just feels so cheap. And
Yeah, and this is the note I'm going to probably end on. Did you watch Ghostbusters as a kid?
Yes.
Have you ever seen new Ghostbusters?
No.
Okay. I think it was actually called like Extreme Ghostbusters or something. I don't even want to look it up because it'll just make me vomit with rage. But they went from a very 80s American friendly, there were 3 white guys and 1 black guy, just like there was in the movie. And I loved that cartoon. I mean, I don't know if it holds up. I haven't seen it in a long time. But when they announced new Ghostbusters, I was like, as a 12-year-old or whatever, I was like, this is the greatest day of my life. Like, everything I ever wanted is coming to fruition. And not only was it a terrible show, but you could just, even as a child, I was like, one of the characters is in a wheelchair, not because that's an interesting part of the character, but because we have this terrible 90s
and
desire.
It's just like so politically correct that it's offensive because that character has to represent all wheelchaired people.
All people in
They
wheelchairs.
can't just be a character.
Exactly. And then there was also one of the Ghostbusters was like a punk gothy woman, and it's like, oh, she's a sassy, take no nonsense kind of girl. And it's like, it's not that she's a strong female, it's that she's strong and a female. And it's like, as
This
if,
is exceptional.
Yeah, as if-
we've never seen this before.
right, like you couldn't just go outside and find women who will not be a doormat. Like, it's like, wow, only in the cartoon universe could you find a strong female who's also friends with someone in a wheelchair.
So I feel like
It was awful.
we're out of time, but I feel like the mid and late 90s, I mean, there's some amazing 90s cartoons. Batman, X-Men.
Gargoyles.
Yeah.
Animaniacs.
But there is I feel like there's this ghetto in the mid, late 90s of like cartoons that we kind of want to forget ever happened.
Yes.
And it's like there's like the 80s and probably some 70s like classics that will never die. They're just like fondly remembered. And then there's like new modern post Ren and Stimpy era.
Yeah.
Like modern adult, not just for kids cartoons. And then there's like the late 90s where it's like, it's like early polygon graphics. Like not good.
Not a good look. So we always ask for like a specific flavor of follow-up. We're happy to let people follow up on everything, but here's the thing I'm interested in this week. If you remember a cartoon from the 90s or something like that from the 90s where you felt like one of those incredibly cliched characters actually did represent your group, I would be super curious to hear about that. Because looking back, I cannot imagine that the girls in my age group, when Extreme Ghostbusters or whatever the hell it was came out, looked at that and were like, oh, I hated Ghostbusters before, but this girl character totally speaks to me. Now I like Ghostbusters. Because it's like, if you didn't like the idea of 4 people running around and chasing ghosts and making teenage level quips, I don't know that the presence of a girl with like blue hair or whatever would suddenly make girls interested in that. That's kind of like when they came out with pink Legos. You remember that? Like, if you're not interested in building blocks.
And that almost like inherently suggests that the rest of the Lego blocks are boys' blocks.
Exactly, which is a terrible distinction.
No.
Like, I had friends that were girls that played with, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures and Legos, and I had friends who were boys that had, tea parties and stuff when I was, like that age, like under 10. And
Before
it's like,
we like shamed it out of everyone with these gender roles.
And it's just, I know it's not like I came from this magical land of diversity. I had lots of friends and I did things that fit into neat little stereotypes, but I just can't imagine the day after Extreme Ghostbusters was announced, a kid in a wheelchair was like, oh, now I'll watch Ghostbusters.
Finally, I've got the Burger King guy, and now I've got Ghostbusters.
Oh my God. What were their
Wheels.
names? What were they, like the Burger King Fun Pals or something? We don't have enough time to do the necessary research. But, I'm happy to hear follow-up about anything, but if anybody can specifically speak to that, I would be super interested. Right. Like, did Wheels make you eat at Burger King? Did the character from Ghostbusters make you say, like, oh my God, now?
Did the hyperventilating wheelchair kid from Malcolm in the Middle give you an identity?
Yeah, is that why you thought Malcolm in the Middle was a good show? That would just, I just can't imagine it working. It just seems like, terrible. So, Mike, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Find me at medwardsmusic on Twitter or pseudomichael.com on the web.
People can find me at Lyons in Beta on Twitter, lyonsinbeta.com, my website. And these show notes are flippingtablespodcast.com/016.
Yeah, so give us some follow-up about any of this, or I figure I didn't quite get exactly what your question was about the cartoons. If you want to write that at the end of the show notes, so
yeah,
I'll visibly have that there.
I'll definitely throw that in there. And that can come up, blog comments, Twitter, wherever. But I just don't believe it. I don't believe this person exists that says, like, no little kid was like, oh, finally, Ghostbusters speaks to me. It's just, sorry. And if you're out there, please tell me. Expand my worldview.
All right.
So good. We will see you all next week.